$38 trillion. That's America's national debt, and the interest on it has exploded past $1 trillion a year, more than the U.S. now spends on defense. This isn't a political debate. It's a math problem, and the cracks are already showing where the system is weakest. Not in Washington, in the states. Right now, 15 U.S. states are already starting to break under that pressure. In this video, we'll look at where those fractures are forming first, and why what happens there will determine how hard the next recession hits everyone else. New York State's economy depends dangerously on New York City. The city generates more than 60% of state tax revenue, despite containing only 40% of the population. When the city struggles, the entire state collapses, and the city is struggling. Manhattan office vacancy rates exceed 20%. Commercial real estate values have fallen 30% to 40%. The finance industry, accounting for over 20% of state GDP, is contracting. Wall Street firms are downsizing or relocating to Miami and Austin. Here's what makes this dangerous. The top 1% of New York filers pay nearly 40% of all state income taxes. These Wall Street traders and executives earning millions per year. During recessions, their bonuses evaporate and state revenue collapses. But now there's a new dynamic. Remote work lets these high earners leave permanently. A trader earning $2 million annually pays $185,000 in state income taxes. Moving to Florida eliminates that entirely. And they're leaving. Since 2020, New York has lost more than 600,000 residents, the largest outmigration of any state. IRS data shows $24 billion in annual income lost to other states, permanently. Meanwhile, upstate New York is collapsing. Buffalo's population fell from 580,000 to 275,000. Rochester, Syracuse, all declining for decades. The state subsidizes upstate from New York City tax revenue. During recessions, that becomes unsustainable. New York owes $440 billion in combined debt and pension obligations. Annual debt service exceeds $8 billion. Pension payments top $20 billion. These are fixed costs that don't decrease when revenue falls. The recession scenario: Wall Street contracts, high earner incomes drop 30 to 50%. State revenue collapses by $15+ billion. Commercial real estate values keep falling. More high earners flee. Tourism declines, upstate collapses entirely. Meanwhile, debt and pension payments remain fixed. New York's model was built on Manhattan being the unchallenged financial capital requiring physical presence. That model is breaking. For the first time in generations, the calculation of living in New York is coming out negative for many people and businesses. New Jersey has the fourth highest median household income in America at $97,000. It also has the worst state finances in the country. Start with property taxes. The average New Jersey homeowner pays $9,284 annually, the highest in America. On a median-priced $510,000 home, that's $775 per month in taxes alone, every month, forever. But those crushing taxes aren't funding better schools or services. They're disappearing into a pension black hole. New Jersey has the worst pension funding ratio in America. For every dollar owed to retired public employees, the state has saved just 36 cents. Total unfunded pension liabilities exceed $200 billion. Combined with $65 billion in regular debt, New Jersey owes $265 billion, roughly $30,000 per resident. Those pension payments aren't optional. They're legally mandated. $6 billion flows out annually to retired workers, money that could fund schools or infrastructure. And it's growing as more baby boomers retire. The result? People are leaving. Since 2017, New Jersey has lost population every year. From 2020 to 2024, approximately 150,000 residents departed. When wealthy retirees flee to Florida, they take hundreds of thousands in annual tax payments with them, forever. This creates a death spiral. High taxes drive residents away. Lost residents mean less revenue. Less revenue forces tax increases or service cuts. Both drive more people away. Remote work accelerated the exodus. Workers discovered they could keep their New York or Philadelphia salaries while living in lower tax states. The geographic advantage evaporated overnight. In a recession, high earners reconsider whether New Jersey's tax burden is worth it. Families struggling with job loss can't afford $9,000 property tax bills. Foreclosures spike. Revenue collapses. New Jersey doesn't need a recession to fail. It's already failing in slow motion. A recession just speeds up the timeline. Start in Seattle. Stand on any corner in the downtown core and look up. The skyline represents something that appears permanent. Glass towers housing some of the world's most valuable companies, cranes suggesting endless construction, the architectural manifestation of wealth. But architecture can be deceiving. Washington State's economy is extraordinarily concentrated. Technology, aerospace, and logistics, three interconnected sectors that employ more than 400,000 people combined. Amazon's headquarters dominates Seattle. Microsoft anchors Redmond. Boeing, though troubled, remains essential to the state's industrial base. This concentration created the prosperity. It also created the vulnerability. The median household income in Washington sits around $97,000, which sounds substantial until you account for what that money actually purchases. The median home price in the Seattle metro area hovers near $790,000. After taxes, mortgage payments, healthcare, and basic living expenses, many families earning six figures have less discretionary income than they did a decade ago when housing was more affordable. Here's what happens in a recession. Tech companies don't gradually reduce headcount. They conduct mass layoffs, trimming 10%, 15%, sometimes 20% of their workforce in a single quarter to satisfy investors and preserve profit margins. If Washington's major tech employers cut just 10% of their combined workforce, that's 40,000 jobs eliminated nearly overnight. But the impact multiplies. Those 40,000 workers supported restaurants, retail stores, service businesses. They paid mortgages and property taxes. They funded the state's sales tax revenue, which accounts for a disproportionate share of Washington's budget because the state has no income tax. Washington's tax structure seemed clever during boom times. No income tax meant attracting high earners was easier. But it also means the state government is excessively dependent on consumer spending and property taxes, both of which collapse during recessions. The homelessness crisis in Seattle, already at more than 52,000 unsheltered residents, illustrates what happens when housing costs outpace wages and social safety nets can't absorb the shock. In a recession, that number could double as tech layoffs intersect with an already tight housing market. Washington's challenge isn't that it's poor, it's that its prosperity is narrow, dependent on industries that are volatile, and sustained by a tax base that evaporates when consumer confidence drops. 730,000 people spread across a territory larger than Texas and California combined. Alaska's geography alone makes its economy precarious, but the real vulnerability lies in a single number, 85%. That's how much of Alaska's state revenue comes from oil. When crude prices are high, Alaska prospers. The state's permanent fund, once holding more than $17 billion in savings, even distributed annual dividends to residents. But when oil prices collapse, as they did in 2020 when crude dropped below $40 per barrel, the entire state budget implodes. Alaska lost $1.5 billion in tax revenue in a matter of months. The global energy transition isn't a theoretical future concern for Alaska. It's a present-day threat to the state's fundamental economic model. As investment shifts toward renewable energy and global oil demand plateaus, Alaska faces structural decline that no temporary boom can reverse. Living in Alaska is expensive in ways that don't show up in median income statistics. Groceries cost 35% more than the national average. Heating costs, essential in a state where winter temperatures can stay below zero for months, have increased 28% year over year. The median home price of $400,000 seems modest compared to Seattle or San Francisco, but against median household income of $86,000, it represents a significant financial burden. Here's the deeper problem. Alaska is losing population. 6 consecutive years of net outflow, mostly young workers seeking opportunities elsewhere. As population declines, the tax base shrinks while the cost of maintaining infrastructure across vast distances remains constant. Tourism, fishing, and resource extraction once formed a diversified economic base. Now all three are contracting. Cruise ship tourism fell 40% during the pandemic and has yet to recover fully. Commercial fishing, devastated by declining salmon stocks and export restrictions, is a shadow of its former $5 billion industry status. The state's rainy day fund has been drained to less than $3 billion. If another recession strikes while oil prices remain weak, Alaska may face a genuine fiscal emergency. Unable to pay pensions, maintain infrastructure in remote regions, or provide basic services. Alaska's situation reveals something important about economic vulnerability. It's not always about absolute levels of debt or poverty. Sometimes it's about dependence, about building an entire state economy on a single commodity in a world that's moving away from that commodity. Louisiana produces 10% of America's total energy output. It should be wealthy. Instead, it ranks near the bottom in household income, with median earnings around $57,000 and nearly 18% of residents living in poverty. How does a state with such abundant resources remain so economically fragile? The answer lies in what economists call the resource curse. States and nations rich in natural resources often fail to develop diversified economies. Instead of investing resource revenue in education, infrastructure, and new industries, they become dependent on extraction alone. When commodity prices are high, the wealth flows. When prices drop, there's nothing to catch the fall. Louisiana's oil and gas industry is contracting under multiple pressures. Global climate policies are accelerating the shift away from fossil fuels. Stricter environmental regulations have led to refinery closures. Between 2020 and 2024, Louisiana lost more than 12,000 energy sector jobs. New investment is declining as companies look elsewhere. Then there's geography. Louisiana faces environmental threats that are no longer theoretical. Each hurricane season now carries billion-dollar price tags. Hurricane Ida alone caused $75 billion in damages. Coastal erosion is destroying land at a rate of one football field every 100 minutes, threatening communities and the industrial infrastructure built along the coast. The state's response capacity is limited. Total state debt exceeds $20 billion, and budget deficits grow annually. When the next hurricane hits or when oil prices drop again, Louisiana lacks the financial reserves to respond effectively. Tourism, particularly in New Orleans, was supposed to diversify the economy. But hotel occupancy remains 15% below pre-pandemic levels. Crime rates and insurance costs are driving away investors. Home insurance premiums have increased 63% in just 3 years, making home ownership increasingly unaffordable even in lower-cost areas. Louisiana represents a cautionary tale about abundance. Having resources isn't enough. Without proper management, diversification, and infrastructure investment, resource wealth can become a trap rather than an advantage. Arizona's population grew past 7.5 million people, driven by migrants seeking warm weather, lower taxes, and affordable housing. That growth looked like success. In reality, it created a crisis in slow motion. The median home price in Phoenix surged to $435,000, up nearly 60% since 2019. Average household income, however, stagnated near $74,000. With mortgage rates above 7%, the affordability calculation that once made Arizona attractive has completely inverted. Foreclosure filings are up 45% year over year. But the housing crisis is a symptom. The underlying disease is water. Arizona draws 36% of its water supply from the Colorado River. That river is shrinking. Federal water allocation cuts in 2025 have forced restrictions on agricultural use, reducing crop output and cutting agricultural revenue by more than $1 billion. Cities like Scottsdale and Mesa are warning residents about future rationing. Think about what water scarcity means for real estate values. A home is only valuable if it has reliable water service. As rationing intensifies, property values across the state could crater regardless of broader economic conditions. This isn't speculation. Water districts are already preparing contingency plans for scenarios where supply falls short of demand. Arizona's job market, once robust with construction and tech manufacturing, is cooling rapidly. Intel's slowdown in chip fab expansion has paused thousands of planned jobs. Home building permits have fallen 41% since 2022, signaling a construction sector in free fall. The state's climate isn't just hot, it's becoming uninsurable. Rising temperatures and severe weather are driving insurance costs higher, adding hundreds of dollars per month to the cost of homeownership. Some insurers have stopped writing new policies entirely. Arizona's growth was built on the assumption of unlimited expansion, unlimited water, unlimited land, unlimited demand. All three assumptions are now being tested simultaneously. New Mexico's poverty rate exceeds 18%, the second highest in the nation. Median household income sits around $56,000. Nearly a quarter of the population relies on government assistance programs. The state's economy is split between federal spending, primarily defense and research installations like Los Alamos and Sandia National Laboratories, and oil production. Both sectors face uncertainty. Federal facilities employ roughly 100,000 people directly and indirectly. That seems stable. But federal budget cuts during recessions hit discretionary programs first, and those installations depend on appropriations that can be reduced or eliminated. If federal spending contracts even modestly, New Mexico's employment numbers would crater. Oil production, while significant, follows the same boom-bust cycle afflicting Alaska and Louisiana. When prices are high, state coffers fill. When prices fall, deficits explode. New Mexico has failed to build financial reserves during boom periods, leaving nothing to cushion the next downturn. The state's infrastructure is aging and insufficient. Rural broadband is nearly non-existent in many areas. Road maintenance backlogs exceed billions of dollars. Education funding ranks among the lowest in the nation, making it difficult to attract businesses that require educated workforces. New Mexico faces a particularly cruel form of poverty. The state has resources, federal installations, oil, natural beauty. But it lacks the infrastructure, education systems, and economic diversification to convert those resources into broadly shared prosperity. Las Vegas is an island of artificial prosperity in a desert. It works beautifully during economic expansions and collapses spectacularly during recessions. The 2008 financial crisis demonstrated this perfectly. Nevada's unemployment rate surged to 14%, the highest in the nation. Foreclosures reached unprecedented levels as construction workers and service employees lost jobs by the tens of thousands. Today, Nevada is walking the same tightrope. Tourism and hospitality account for more than 30% of all employment. When consumer confidence drops and discretionary spending evaporates, those jobs vanish. Casino revenues are already softening as inflation reduces the amount of money people have available for gambling and entertainment. The median home price in Las Vegas has climbed to $450,000, while median household income hovers around $71,000. The math doesn't work. Many homeowners are once again stretching to afford mortgages that consume 40% or more of their income, leaving no margin for unexpected expenses or job loss. Nevada's population growth, once a sign of economic vitality, has slowed dramatically. The retirees who once flocked to the state are staying away, deterred by rising costs and extreme heat. Young workers are discovering that service sector wages can't support the cost of living. The state's tax structure, which relies overwhelmingly on sales taxes and gaming revenues, makes budget planning nearly impossible. During recessions, those revenue streams can drop 30% or more in a single year, forcing devastating cuts to education and services. Nevada's fundamental problem is that its economy is built on discretionary consumer spending. When people have extra money, they visit Las Vegas. When they don't, they stay home. There's no middle ground. Ohio represents something that often gets overlooked in discussions of state economies, the long, grinding decline of industrial America. The state isn't facing sudden collapse. Instead, it's experiencing a decades-long erosion of its economic base. Manufacturing employment has fallen from more than 1 million workers in 2000 to fewer than 700,000 today. Those weren't just jobs. They were careers that supported middle-class lifestyles without requiring college degrees. What replaced them? Service jobs paying $15 to $20 per hour, retail positions, gig economy work. The math is straightforward. A factory worker earning $65,000 with benefits gets laid off. The best available replacement job pays $32,000 without benefits. That family's purchasing power has been cut in half, and they're not alone. Multiply this across hundreds of thousands of households, and you understand why Ohio's median income has stagnated while costs have risen. The population story is equally grim. Ohio has lost more than 200,000 residents since 2020. Young, educated workers leave for cities with better opportunities. Older residents remain, along with those who lack the resources to relocate. This creates a demographic trap where the tax base shrinks while the demand for services, particularly healthcare for an aging population, increases. Ohio's cities tell the story in granular detail. Cleveland, once a manufacturing powerhouse, has seen its population fall from 900,000 to 370,000. Downtown office vacancies exceed 22%. Property values have stagnated or declined, eroding the tax base that funds schools and services. Youngstown, a former steel town, has lost two-thirds of its population since 1950. The tax base can barely support basic services. Infrastructure is crumbling. The city represents what happens when an economy built on a single industry loses that industry and finds nothing to replace it. The opioid crisis compounds everything. Ohio ranks among the states with the highest overdose death rates. Drug addiction reduces workforce participation, strains healthcare systems, and creates social costs that governments struggle to address. Ohio's problem isn't that it faces an imminent crisis, it's that it's already in one, a slow-motion collapse that's been underway for decades. The next recession will simply accelerate trends already in motion. Detroit. The word itself has become synonymous with urban decline. But Michigan's challenges extend far beyond a single city. The state's economy remains disproportionately dependent on automotive manufacturing, an industry facing existential transformation. The shift to electric vehicles requires fewer workers and different skills. Traditional automotive suppliers are struggling to adapt. As major manufacturers retool for EVs, thousands of conventional auto jobs are disappearing. Michigan's median household income of $68,000 sounds reasonable until you consider the cost structure. Property taxes are high. Auto insurance rates are the highest in the nation, averaging more than $3,000 annually, and housing costs in desirable areas have risen significantly. The state's infrastructure is in crisis. Michigan has more than 1,200 structurally deficient bridges and roads rated among the worst in America. The cost to address these deficiencies exceeds $30 billion, money the state doesn't have. Poor infrastructure increases business costs, damages vehicles, and makes the state less attractive for new investment. Detroit's bankruptcy in 2013 was supposed to be a fresh start. In some ways it was. The city reduced its pension obligations and restructured debt. But the fundamental problems remain. Population continues to decline. Property tax revenues remain insufficient. Crime rates, while improved, are still among the highest for major cities. Flint's water crisis revealed another dimension of Michigan's challenges: environmental debt. Decades of deferred infrastructure maintenance and cost-cutting created a public health disaster. Flint isn't unique. Many Michigan cities face similar infrastructure challenges, where aging water and sewer systems need billions in investment. Michigan's challenge is adaptation. The automotive industry that built the state's prosperity is transforming faster than the workforce can retrain. The cities that once thrived are hollowed out. The tax base is eroding, and the financial resources needed to manage this transition are inadequate. Pennsylvania is a state of profound contradictions. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh anchor relatively prosperous metro areas. But between them lies a vast expanse of economic decline. The state's coal industry, once employing hundreds of thousands, is nearly extinct. Steel production, while still present, is a fraction of its former scale. The small towns and mid-sized cities built around these industries have been abandoned not by their residents, but by economic opportunity. Pennsylvania's median household income of $73,000 masks extraordinary inequality. In the Philadelphia suburbs, households earn significantly more. In former coal counties, median incomes can be 30% to 40% lower, with poverty rates exceeding 20%. The state faces a pension crisis that rivals Illinois. Unfunded pension liabilities exceed $50 billion, consuming an ever larger share of the state budget. Money that should fund schools and infrastructure instead goes to pension payments for retired workers. Infrastructure degradation is visible everywhere. Pennsylvania has more structurally deficient bridges than any other state. Roads are in poor condition. Public transit systems in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are struggling with deferred maintenance and declining ridership. The population is aging faster than most states. As older residents require more health care and social services, the working-age population that funds those services through taxes is shrinking. This demographic imbalance will intensify over the next decade. Pennsylvania's geographic position, between the prosperous Northeast and the struggling Midwest, seems like an advantage, but it also means the state doesn't fit neatly into either region's economic narrative. It's too industrial to benefit from knowledge economy growth, but too service-oriented to compete with low-cost manufacturing states. Maryland has the third highest median household income in America, at approximately $97,000. Its schools are well-funded, its infrastructure is generally good. On paper, Maryland looks successful. But scratch the surface and you find an economy alarmingly dependent on a single employer, the federal government. Nearly 30% of Maryland's jobs are directly or indirectly connected to federal spending. Defense contractors, government agencies, federal employees, supporting businesses, they all depend on Washington, D.C. remaining a growth center. Here's the vulnerability. When federal budgets tighten, when hiring freezes occur, when agencies consolidate or relocate, Maryland's economy stutters. The state has almost no cushion. Manufacturing has declined by 20% over the past decade. The private sector outside government contracts is relatively weak. State debt exceeds $40 billion. Pension liabilities are projected to grow another $5 billion by 2026. Despite its high incomes, Maryland is spending more than it collects, and the gap is widening. The housing market, once a pillar of middle-class wealth, is showing cracks. The median home price has surged to $445,000. Mortgage payments have increased 38% in just 2 years. In Montgomery and Prince George's counties, delinquencies are rising, particularly among families who bought at the peak in 2021. Baltimore, the state's largest city, is in serious trouble. More than 20,000 residents have left since 2020. Downtown office vacancy rates exceed 28%. The Port of Baltimore, which handles more than $80 billion in trade annually, has seen sharp declines in exports due to global economic slowdown and automation reducing labor needs. Maryland's affluence is real, but it's fragile. Built on federal employment and inflated asset values, it could erode quickly if either foundation weakens. Illinois is already functionally insolvent. It just hasn't officially declared it yet. The state has $60 billion in unpaid bills and more than $140 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. Its credit rating is one notch above junk, the lowest of any state. Every financial metric that should flash red is flashing red. Chicago, the economic engine that should pull the state forward, is failing. Commercial real estate vacancy rates exceed 23%. Downtown property values have fallen 35% since 2019. Major corporations, Boeing, Citadel, Tyson Foods, have relocated, taking tens of thousands of high-paying jobs with them. Property taxes in Illinois average 2.1%, second highest in the nation. On a $295,000 home, that's more than $6,000 annually. These taxes drive residents away, particularly retirees on fixed incomes who can't absorb the burden. Since 2020, Illinois has lost more than 340,000 residents. Each one takes their tax payments with them. The state is caught in a death spiral. Declining population reduces revenue, which requires raising taxes or cutting services, which drives more people away. Manufacturing employment has fallen 15% over the past decade. Logistics hubs, once growing, are slowing as consumer demand weakens. Unemployment is climbing toward 6%, and inflation continues eroding purchasing power. Illinois' reliance on borrowing to fund pensions and services means it's extraordinarily vulnerable to credit downgrades. If the state's rating falls to junk status, borrowing costs will skyrocket, potentially making it impossible to raise new capital without draconian terms. The next recession won't create Illinois' crisis. It will expose a crisis that's been building for decades, revealing that the state's fiscal position is mathematically unsustainable. California's economy is larger than most countries. It's the fifth largest in the world, generating more than $4 trillion in annual economic activity. That size has created a dangerous illusion of invincibility. The state's economy depends on three sectors: real estate, entertainment, and technology. All three are now contracting. Silicon Valley has shed more than 90,000 jobs since 2022. Meta, Google, Tesla, and dozens of smaller firms have cut billions from payrolls. Office vacancy rates in San Francisco have hit 36%, the highest of any major American city. Entire downtown blocks sit empty, their property tax revenue evaporating. The housing market, long California's pride and its biggest source of private wealth, has become a liability. The median home price statewide is $760,000. But with 7% mortgage rates and soaring insurance premiums, affordability has reached a 40-year low. Home sales are down 45% from their 2021 peak. Foreclosures have jumped 31% year over year. Even wealthy counties like Marin and Santa Clara are seeing listings flood the market with few buyers. The assumption that California real estate always appreciates is being tested for the first time in decades. Population decline tells another part of the story. California has lost more than 800,000 residents since 2020. These aren't random departures. They're high earners fleeing taxes and regulations. Oracle, Tesla, and dozens of mid-sized tech firms have relocated to Texas, Nevada, and Florida. IRS migration data shows California has lost $56 billion in taxable income. The state government recently admitted to a $68 billion budget deficit, driven by collapsing income tax receipts. When wealthy residents leave, they take disproportionate tax revenue with them. California's top 1% of earners pay nearly 50% of all state income taxes. As that group shrinks, revenue collapses. Homelessness exceeds 180,000 people. Water shortages threaten agriculture. Insurance costs are making homeownership unaffordable even for upper-middle-class families. The convergence of these crises is unprecedented. California faces a choice it's been avoiding: fundamentally restructure its economy and governance, or watch its prosperity erode as residents and businesses continue leaving. Florida is where the American dream goes to die in sunshine. For decades, Florida represented opportunity, warm weather, no state income tax, affordable living, and endless growth. Retirees flocked south. Young families followed. Developers built endlessly. The population grew by nearly 1,000 people per day. That growth has created a state-sized house of cards. Tourism accounts for 25% of Florida's GDP. In 2025, hotel occupancy is down 18%. Air travel has fallen 22%. International visitors have plunged 30%. The snowbirds, northern retirees who once spent winters in Florida, are vanishing, hit by inflation, insurance costs, and skyrocketing rent. The real estate market is imploding. The median home price sits around $410,000, but property insurance premiums have surged 68% in just 2 years, now averaging $6,000 per home annually. Thousands of residents can no longer afford coverage. Insurers are abandoning the state entirely, unwilling to write new policies in hurricane zones. Foreclosure filings are up 39%. Inventory is surging across formerly booming regions: Tampa, Fort Myers, Orlando. The speculative buying that drove prices up is reversing. Infrastructure is breaking under population pressure. Power grids strained during summer heat. Water systems were built for populations half the current size. Transportation networks are overwhelmed. And then there's the water itself. Rising sea levels threaten $2.9 trillion in coastal real estate. Hurricane damage costs have doubled since 2015. Hurricane Ian alone caused $113 billion in losses. The state lacks the financial reserves to absorb repeated billion-dollar disasters. Employment is tightening. Construction, hospitality, and retail, sectors employing more than 40% of Florida's workforce, are facing layoffs as demand cools. Tourism-dependent towns are reporting record business closures. Florida's economy is built on tourism, real estate speculation, and retiree savings. In a recession, all three pillars collapse simultaneously. The beaches will remain, but the prosperity that drew millions will wash away, revealing an economy that was never as stable as it appeared. In these 15 states, the next recession is no longer theoretical, it's measurable. How the rest of the country responds to their problems will determine how deep and how long this downturn becomes.